Hey everybody, welcome to J-Ho the Sports Dude. Thank you for listening to my podcast. Normally I usually start off these podcasts with my theme song, but I kind of feel like today it wouldn't be appropriate to start it off. I'll play it after, I'll play it later in the podcast, but I don't really feel like starting off the podcast with the theme song. We'll once we get into more happier news, I'll get the theme song, and then we can talk about the NBA Finals and of course the Stanley Cup Finals and other news. But unfortunately, this week something pretty shocking happened. Luckily, it wasn't life-threatening, but yeah. So I'm sure you guys heard David Ortiz got shot in the Dominican Republic. I'll go over the details of what happened. We'll see, and we'll go over what possibly could have happened, and the conclusions we can get from it, and we could talk about David Ortiz. I will warn you, some of the details are a little graphic, but I feel it's important to give all the details for the story. So, alright then, so let me read you what I found from the reports that I've read. So, on Sunday, David Ortiz was shot and wounded at a bar in the Dominican Republic. I believe it's called Dar Bar and Lounge, which is a nightclub in the nation's capital where David Ortiz is from. And this is one of his, apparently one of his favorite places to go. And so, there's a surveillance video that came out of this in which it shows that David Ortiz was sitting down and chilling out with his friends, and the video shows that Ortiz was shot in the back from some assailant on a motorcycle. So I actually found this out while watching the Stanley Cup Finals game, Game 6, and the initial reports that I saw off of, I believe it was a Bleacher Report, or I think it was either Bleacher Report or Facebook where I first saw this. The initial reports was he got shot in the leg. So at first I thought, this is pretty scary, but this is something that Poppy can easily recover from. And then, like, the reports on this were changed quite a bit ever since people have been able to get more information. So the video shows that he got shot in the back from an assailant on a motorcycle, and the first report said it was a robbery, but I actually did see the video, and it didn't exactly look like a robbery to me. Because robberies are usually, if you get shot, it's usually pretty frantic and sporadic. Like, it would kind of look like he's just kind of shooting you accidentally. This looked kind of premeditated. This looks like he was aiming to shoot David Ortiz. So, I mean, we'll find out more, but this kind of looked a little premeditated. And also, right now, we don't know the motive behind why he would do this. So he was taken to the hospital to have surgery, and initially, David Ortiz's father said that no organs were damaged and a full recovery was expected. Apparently, the bullet entered through Ortiz's back and exited through his abdomen, and also, Leo Lopez, Ortiz's media assistant, told ESPN that the doctors removed part of Ortiz's intestines, colon, and gallbladder during a 6-hour operation, and he also suffered liver damage. And he said that David Ortiz would be able to turn it around. Will be able to make a full recovery. So I've heard various reports. I mean, from what I read, it seems like he'll survive, so it's not life-threatening. However, it does seem like he's in a pretty rough condition, considering that he had to have surgery and some of his organs look like it's been damaged. So I'm not 100% sure. From what I've heard he's in a good condition right now, but now is the question: will David Ortiz suffer from long-term effects from the damage that he received. So, thank goodness it wasn't life-threatening. Also, David Ortiz was brought back to Boston to get more medical work done on him. So, we'll see. We'll get some more updates, hopefully, soon. From what I've read, he seems to be doing just fine. The suspect's name is Eddie Felice Garcia. I believe there are other suspects in the shooting, but they were, I believe some of them are in custody. I think some of them are not. And I believe that before he was arrested, the people around him were able to catch him and beat him up before the cops came. So we'll find out if he's the actual guy and what his motive will be. So there were a lot of people who responded to this incident. So one of them was Major League Baseball, who tweeted out, "Our thoughts are with David Ortiz, who is reportedly hospitalized after being shot in his hometown of Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic." And then the Red Sox released a statement saying, "Late last night, we were made aware of an incident involving David Ortiz in the Dominican Republic. David's family has confirmed that he has sustained a gunshot wound to the lower back/abdomen region. David is treated in Clinica Abel Gonzalez in Santo Domingo, where he is recovering after surgery. We have offered David's family an available resources to aid his recovery, and will continue to keep them in our hearts." Hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. Joel Lopez, a TV host in the Dominican Republic, who was speaking to Ortiz at the bar where the shooting took place, was also injured. He suffered a non-life-threatening injury, and I believe he was struck in the leg with the same bullet that hit Ortiz. Sam Kennedy, the president of the Boston Red Sox, as well as Dave Dombrowski and the GM of the Red Sox and Alex Cora, they had a press conference and they talked about David Ortiz. So this is what Sam Kennedy said. "It shook us to the core. I can speak on behalf of John and Tom and everyone in the front office. It was jarring. It was frankly stunning and terrifying. It was a horrific incident." Kennedy also got choked up. "It was an emotional time. I love David Ortiz. We all love David Ortiz. Telling my kids last night what happened was really difficult. I know the same holds true for everyone up here for ownership. It's hard to express what David Ortiz means to the Boston Red Sox. When you love someone and they come in harm's way, it's jarring. But you have to put these things aside and focus on what's necessary." And this is what President of Basketball Operations, David Dombrowski, said. Extremely difficult. It's shocking when you get this type of news. I heard it last night at the same time. Your heart goes out immediately to him and his family. It was also different gathering information that was accurate. Making sure we tried to get that with all the different types of indications on what had taken place. You're shaken really, and what it comes down to when you hear this type of information. He's iconic, but he's a friend. When you hear that, you feel for him and his family." And Alex Cora, who was teammates with Ortiz from 2005 to 2008, said that it's hard to believe. I just kept praying, stay positive, and when he comes back, he will be taken care of, and he'll be back. He'll be in that clubhouse with a big smile and that huge heart. And he urged fans to pray for Ortiz. He said, "One thing about David is he's strong. He has no fear, and he will never show weakness. Because of that reason, the Lord will be with him. For us that believe, just pray for him. Just keep the positive vibes." So, also a ton of athletes tweeted out in their support and prayers for David Ortiz, including Pedro Martinez, Alex Rodriguez, Jason Varitek, Tom Brady, Mike Trout, Alex Bregman, Justin Turner, Alex Cora, and even Barack Obama tweeted out in prayer for and recovery for David Ortiz. So this definitely got the sports world in shock. And I remember when I heard it, at first I was pretty shooken up. Obviously, you're shocked. You don't think that the athletes that you grew up watching are gonna get shot. And at first, a part of you kind of thinks, is this a joke? Because sometimes you'll get those articles that people post that is like that aren't true, and they're just kind of posted for shock value. And unfortunately, this was no joke. And then once I did some research and I read more about this story, my heart just sank just because of how graphic and horrific this story is. So, so talking about David Ortiz, I mean, we all know his resume. His resume is legendary. I mean, he won 3 World Series titles in 04, 07, and 2013, and he might have been the biggest reason why the Red Sox were able to win in 04 with those big hits, clutch hits against the New York Yankees in that 04 series against to go to the World Series. Also known as Big Papi, he's also a 10-time All-Star, 7-time Silver Slugger, finished top 5 in MVP voting 5 times, and he was also the World Series MVP in 2013. He also retired in 2016, and he hit with a .315 average and led the league in doubles and runs batted in during that year that he retired. He also finished his career with 541 home runs, which is 17th all-time, and was 8th all-time in extra base hits and 12th in all-time doubles. And definitely the most clutch Red Sox of all time. If you wanted somebody at the plate to hit a big run or hit a home run or hit a ball when you need it, you needed David Ortiz, and one of the most clutch baseball players ever. I mean, and who could forget that grand slam against the Detroit Tigers in Game 2 to tie the game? I mean, if he does not hit that grand slam, they're probably not winning that game. And if they lose Game 2 and lose both games at Fenway Park, they're not winning that series. So, who could forget that? But besides being a great ball player, he was a great person who epitomized and is definitely a figure in Boston. When the Boston Marathon bombing happened, it was David Ortiz's speech that really helped galvanize the city. His "This is our fucking city" speech, and he along with all the other leaders on the Red Sox team in 2013 really took on that identity as Boston Strong, as the team's identity, and wore it on their shoulders throughout the whole year, and they were able to win the World Series for Boston. And also, David Ortiz was a very charitable guy, and the one thing that I think everybody who's around him notices is his glowing smile and the fact that he can light up a room with his charisma. Like, I don't think it's a stretch to say that David Ortiz might be the most charismatic athlete in Boston sports history. And also, he's a hero in the Dominican Republic. And it's so sad that he was shot in the place that he grew up in. And it's sickening that somebody that brought smiles on people's faces got harmed this way. So I don't know if this will have a long-term effect on him physically. We'll see how he does in his recovery. But one thing I know is David Ortiz is about as tough an athlete in Boston sports history, and I believe he will come back from this. It might take a little while. He probably needs some physical therapy. He's gonna need some time with the surgeries. But I believe he will come back from this because he's a fighter. And all I got to say is David Ortiz was with us to make us happy with his performance as a baseball player. So it's time for us to be there for him as he is recovering. So hopefully David Ortiz is doing okay, and hopefully he can recover soon. All right, then we'll take a break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the Stanley Cup Finals, NBA Finals, and the Red Sox. So we'll go. We'll after the break, we'll go on like as kind of like how the regular show would go. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for listening to J-Ho the Sports Dude. So, all right then, let's turn that off. All right then, obviously, like I said before, hopefully David Ortiz is doing okay. But, all right then, why don't we move on? All right, let's talk about the Stanley Cup Finals. So, Game 5 was a pretty contested game. Also, the game was in TD Garden. So, to start off, the Bruins played pretty well in the first period. They got a couple of good shots, good opportunities, but they just couldn't get anything past the net. They just couldn't get anything past Jordan Binnington, who definitely played the best game he has all Stanley Cup Finals. So the game was, and then in the second period, it was more evenly played, and then Ryan O'Reilly got the first goal for the Blues. And then, but for the most part, the Bruins they couldn't really get any good opportunities on Jordan Binnington, and whenever they got an okay opportunity, it was just stopped. And the Blues were it just seemed like they were quicker, and they were getting to pucks quicker, and so it was pretty frustrating. However, the Bruins were pushing quite a bit in the third period. They just couldn't quite get it through. And then, next thing you know, here we go. We get the no call. So, in the Bruins zone, Noel Chari was obviously tripped right in front of a ref, and then there was no call. There was no call. And as a result, the Blues were able to get the puck in the net to go up 2-0. And so unfortunately the Bruins, it looked like they were done. So apparently the referees, they're not just making calls based on judgment, they're just making calls based on influence, because apparently the Blues head coach had an influence. It seems like the Blues head coach Craig Berube had an influence on the refs by asking for less calls. And like a lot of people noticed that in Game 4, there were definitely a lot less calls for the Bruins than in Game 3, when they just got a few penalty shots, and they were able to go 4-4 on the power play. And I gotta say, like, in that game, the Blues had more power play opportunities. They just couldn't. They could only cash in one. So yeah, I don't know what Craig Berube is talking about. And so apparently, and for Game 4, I didn't think the refs were bad, because I thought in Game 4 the Bruins just weren't aggressive enough, and they just didn't have opportunities to cause power plays. Well, this game, not the case. I mean, there were plenty moments in which there should have been a penalty, but for some reason they decided to hold their whistle. Obviously, the worst was the Noah Chari trip, and then also there was a illegal hit on Marcus Johansson from Ivan Barbashev, and that didn't even get a penalty. But later we find out that Barbashev got suspended for a game, and it didn't even get called for a penalty. What the heck? I mean, and plus, this postseason, I mean, it's already bad enough that the refs have been ruining this postseason. Let's just go over this. So, in the first round, there was a major penalty on Cody Eakin in the against the Golden Knights, and that was questionable. There was a non-call on out of play puck in Game 4 of the Bruins versus the Blue Jackets in the Eastern Conference semifinals. That was questionable. There was an offsides call on the Avalanche's Gabriel Landeskog. I think that I pronounced it Landeskog on Game 7 of the Western Conference semifinals. That was questionable. And also, I'm sure you remember from 2 weeks ago the missed hand pass on the Sharks' Timo Meier in Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals. So yeah. Apparently, I mean, in a postseason in which the refs have been one of the storylines for how the postseason has been bad, you would think they'd be more cautious and have less margin for error. But apparently that's not the case. And apparently, I mean, I understand that that refs want to let players play and not have an influence. But if it's obvious, you need to call it because that's your job. And if you're not, then why are you there? And this obviously the first call that comes to mind when you think of terrible non-calls is the NFC Championship game with the non-call pass interference. I won't say it's as bad as that because that was a game in which you lost, you gone home. The Bruins still had plenty of opportunities to come back. But it was pretty close. So apparently you can this is the NHL logic. So apparently you can accidentally hit somebody in the head and then get a penalty. But if you get a blatant trip, it gets nothing. Because that makes sense. And Bruce Cassidy, rightfully so, was pretty pissed during the press conference. He called the officiating a black eye on the league, and he said it was embarrassing, which, of course, it was. And some fans threw stuff on the ice after that, and I actually don't blame them for doing that. I would have considered doing that too if I was at the game, because it was horrible. I mean, I saw a video of two fans fighting. I don't think that's really necessary, but I don't actually blame fans for throwing stuff on the ice. And I think Berube said that he's not there to judge the officials. Well, you definitely judged the officials after Game 3 when you said that you were the least penalized team and that you shouldn't get penalties after you got your butts whipped in Game 3. And so, apparently, the NHL Senior Vice President and Director of Officiating, Stephen Walcom, this moron, decided to reach a statement, have a statement after this non-call. This is what he said. I'm going to use my dumb voice. We don't make comments on judgment calls within the games. There were hundreds of judgment calls called in every game. The officials on the play, he viewed it, and he didn't view it as a penalty at the time. So one, you're basically saying, you're not denying that, essentially what this statement, you're not denying that wasn't a penalty. You're just saying that they don't make judgments on the calls. That helps. I mean, if I could punch him in the face, he could. Alright then. So, whatever. Jake DeBrusk was able to get a goal to make it 2-1 to make it a little interesting, but the Bruins, they just couldn't really get anything going, and they had some opportunities, but they just couldn't get the goal into the net to tie the game, and the Blues won 2-1. So, going into Game 6, I was a little worried because it seemed like the Bruins put everything they could in this game, and they just couldn't get any offense mustering, and they just couldn't solve the Blues defense. And also injuries were piling up. I mean, Matt Grzelcyk obviously was hurt, and Zdeno Chara was basically working without a jaw. Also, I should mention that Zdeno Chara did play in Game 5, and he played with a broken jaw. That just shows you how tough Zdeno Chara is. And he had this face mask on, and he got a standing ovation for playing. So, good for him. But however, with the defenseman being injured and the injuries piling up, I was really worried about what the Bruins, how the Bruins were going into Game 6. And also, it seemed like something interesting kind of happened before the game. So Bruce Cassidy decided to put Carson Coleman, a rookie who I'm pretty sure was benched against the Blue Jackets because he wasn't physical enough, instead of David Backes, which was very questionable. And then, but there was one thing that made me kind of hopeful that the Bruins were able to win Game 6. The Bruins have been a very solid road team in the playoffs. And the Blues at that time were not a great home team. I believe at that time they were 6-6. So going into Game 6, I was pretty worried. I actually thought they were going to lose. And they didn't. So let's move on to talk about Game 6. So in the first period, the Blues, I thought the Blues had the better opportunities. But this time, instead of Binnington, Rask was the one on shutdown. Rask was able to keep the Bruins in the game by not allowing any goals in the first period. The Bruins, they did get the first goal with the Marchand goal on 5-on-3, and good thing that happened because that would have been just like disheartening if they couldn't get a goal on a 5-on-3. And I read this stat that I think whenever Marchand scores in the playoffs, I think they've only lost once. So hopefully, Marchand, when he scores, there's a good possibility you're going to win. And the Blues continue to get opportunities, including a moment when Charlie McAvoy knocked a puck away from the net when it looked like it was going to go in. And so the Blues were getting their opportunities. And then next thing you know, Brandon Carlos scores on a bouncing puck in the third period. And then you could start to see that this game, the Blues were kind of shook, and all their physical play and their opportunities just started to dwindle away. Then Carson Coleman scored, and then basically the game was over. This game kind of made Bruce Cassidy look like a genius with Carson Coleman, because they looked much better than they did in Game 5. Ryan O'Reilly did score, and then on what looked to be a save at first. So the game got a little more interesting, and then David Pastrnak scored, and then Zdeno Chara scored an empty net goal, and next thing you know, Bruins won 5-1, and now we're going to a Game 7. So let me read for you the stats for Game 5. Game 5, you would think the Bruins would have had a massive advantage, but it was actually I think the stats for this game were a little misleading. Bruins had 39 shots, Blues had 21 shots. Hits, Bruins had 43 hits. The Blues had 34 hits. And block shots were both even. Takeaways, Bruins had 11, Blues had 8, and giveaways, Blues had 7, Bruins had 4. And Torrey Krug had an assist. Jordan Binnington had a great game, and Ryan O'Reilly had a goal and an assist. And Ryan O'Reilly has really gone off in these playoffs. Game 7, I expect him to be a factor, and hopefully the Bruins can neutralize him quite a bit. In Game 6, I mean, from the scoreboard, you might think that this game was lopsided, but this game actually was a lot closer than it was. It was basically a game until the third period. Shots, Bruins had 32 shots, Blues had 29 shots. Hits, Bruins had 27 hits, Blues had 29 29 hits. Block shots, Bruins had 16. Blues had 9. Giveaways, Bruins had 4. Blues had 12. Tuukka Rask had a great game. Jake DeBrusk had an assist, and David Krejci had an assist, and Brandon Carlo also played really well for the Bruins. He's been playing great for them. So, and I'll also mention this about Game 6. So, if you know me, I generally don't believe in curses. I don't believe in hockey gods. I don't believe in that stuff. That being said, I do believe in celebrating too early. And I believe in karma. And one thing I did read about read before the game was that the Blues, they had a whole floor ready to celebrate in their building. And they had a newspaper that had a thank you letter from the owner and an ad congratulating the Blues for winning the Stanley Cup. And that got me thinking, oh boy, there's a chance that they might lose. Because usually when you celebrate too early, then usually that's not good for the team that's planning on celebrating too early. I can remember I read a story about how the Lakers in the 1969 finals against the Celtics were in LA and they expected to win, so they had balloons in the rafters and they were planning on having the USC band out. And so Bill Russell and the Celtics heard about this, and they were determined to make sure the Lakers did not win that game, and they didn't. So, yeah, like I said before, I don't believe in the hockey gods, but I believe in celebrating too early. And I believe the Blues definitely, I think there was a mindset that they were going to win that game. And also, I think maybe some nerves kicked in for the Blues, for the pressure of winning at home. So I think that might have been a factor, and maybe the Blues not winning Game 6. But I just believe the Bruins just played better. And also, Patrice Bergeron, I heard he had an inspirational speech before the game. None of us know about the details of what he said in that speech, but apparently it made Charlie McAvoy cry, and I believe he said that it made him want to run to the wall for Patrice Bergeron. And it definitely was definitely a boost. One, because Patrice Bergeron usually doesn't give speeches, and two, he has experience, and he knows what it takes to win a critical game in the Stanley Cup Final. So, I mean, this is the guy who played hurt in Game 6 against the Blackhawks. So this guy knows what it takes to win one of these games. I'm a little surprised the Bruins didn't get more power play opportunities. Actually, the Blues had more power play opportunities than the Bruins had. So, Bruins had two power play opportunities to get one goal, and the Blues had 4 power play opportunities. So, that's a little weird considering how much the refs screwed up. And usually when the refs screw up, they try to make up for it, which is honestly not what refs should do, but apparently that's what usually that's what happens. So that was a little strange. And also, it was a little frustrating that the Blues got a power play opportunity on a play that looked like the Noah Charlie non-call in Game 5. So, all right then, Game 7 in TD Garden. Let's see what happens. But first, let me tell you some observations I've really gotten from watching this series. So, one thing I noticed is that the Blues, they really thrive off of getting a lead in the game. Because once they get a lead, they can play their defensive game. And usually when a team is trying to come back at them, they thrive off playing their defensive game. And they don't thrive as much when they're trying to get back, and they're off because they don't have the offensive players as the Bruins, and the Bruins match up very well against the Bruins defense matches well against the Blues defense. I mean the Blues offense. But if the Bruins offense is trying to go up against the Blues defense, then that goes in the Blues' favor because the Blues they have favorable matchups against the Bruins on defense. So it definitely seems like the Blues as a team, they thrive off of getting the lead, because in the games that they've won, except for Game 2, whenever they've gotten the lead, actually with the exception of Game 1, whenever they've gotten the lead, they basically won the game. Game 1 was an exception because after the Blues got the lead, the Bruins essentially dominated the whole game. And Game 2 was also an exception because the Bruins got the lead and the Blues were able to come back. Because it just seems like the Blues, when they get the lead, they get to play their game, which is defense, getting to pucks quicker, not allowing opportunities for the opposing offense to get opportunities. But if they go down and they don't have the lead, then they have to try to create opportunities to get offensive, to try to get a goal. And they don't have a lot of players that really scare you offensively. So, and definitely not as much as the Bruins do. So, all right then. So I believe it's important that the Bruins get the first goal in Game 7. So also you need a total team effort from the multiple lines of the Bruins to show up offensively, especially the top line. When Bergeron, Marchand, and Pastrnak make a contribution, that usually means they win. If they don't, then you usually get games like Game 5 and Game 2. And I expect maybe somebody like Sean Corrali or Jake DeBrusk or Brandon Carlo to make a difference too, or Marcus Johansson. And also the Bruins should take advantage of the special teams advantage because the Bruins, their power play is the best power play in the one of the greatest power plays in the NHL playoffs ever. And the Blues, they have a pretty solid penalty kill, but their power play is not very good. So if the Bruins are aggressive, and I believe the Blues, there might at times be a little over aggressive because it's a Game 7, so that might force some power play opportunities. So the Bruins need to take advantage of those power play opportunities. Also, Rask, he needs to outplay Binnington, who has shown some cracks in the Stanley Cup Finals, and except for Game 5, I don't think he's had a great Stanley Cup Final. And also, Bruins need to get to the pucks quicker than the Blues and complete forechecks, and also they need to utilize their speed, because I believe the Bruins, they have a speed advantage on offense, and so they need to utilize their speed in the neutral zone. And if they can do that, they can create opportunities for goals and get past Binnington. And of course, limiting giveaways. Also, just keep shooting at Binnington. Try not to get the fancy goals, because if you try to get the fancy goals, then this Blues defense is really smart, so they can get to the pucks right away and not allow you to get a shot on goal. And so I would expect the Blues to try to play a low-scoring game like in Game 5. So that's what I expect from the Blues. I expect them to play like they did in Game 5, to make this a low-scoring game and hopefully get the first goal and be able to play their game so they can win. So there's one thing else I want to say about the Blues. The thing about the Blues, what makes me worried about Game 7, is that it seems like they're a better road team than they are a home team. It's a little weird. At home, they're 6-7. On the road, they're 9-3. So that's a little weird. And also Binnington, he usually plays much better after a loss. And what I take away from that is, I think the Blues, they just seem to play better when they're in a hostile environment and they're counted out. So So I would be a little worried about the Blues coming into this game because this is the moment in which you expect the Blues to play really well. However, also the top line and Rask have basically throughout this playoffs shown up in a potential game-winning series, like against in Game 7 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Rask and the top line showed up. Again in Game 6 against the Blue Jackets, the top line and Tuukka Rask showed up. In Game 4 against the Hurricanes, the top line and Rask have shown up, and so Tuukka Rask and the top line have usually shown up, have always showed up in these playoffs in a potential game-winning series, a potential game winner. And the Bruins have veterans who know how to handle winning a Game 7, especially in a Stanley Cup, and the Blues do not. So I think that is a big advantage. And also, I don't know if you knew this, but this is the first Game 7 at home in the Bruins history. A team that's been around since, I believe, 1924 is hosting their first ever Stanley Cup Game 7 at home. That's crazy. So, I mean, Game 7's on. I mean, Game 7's is where, 1924. So Game 7's are when legacies and legends are cemented. I mean, these games define legacies. And we'll see what happens. Hopefully the Bruins can put together their best game and win Game 7. May the best team win. Hopefully Boston can put together their best team win forward in this game. Because in Game 5 they didn't. Game 2 they didn't. So hopefully they can even out the home wins during this postseason, during this Stanley Cup, during the Stanley Cup, because Bruins. I mean, they haven't been the most dominant home team. I mean, they've been better than the Blues, but hopefully in a big spot, experience comes through, because this is when your veterans come in handy. This is when experience matters in the games that are do or die. So, go Bruins, and we'll see what happens. All right then, why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the Red Sox, who, we'll talk about them when we come back. All right then, welcome back. All right, let's talk about the Boston Red Sox. So, week was pretty mixed bag, to say the least. They started off pretty good with a sweep over the Royals. Then again, the Royals are one of the worst teams in baseball, so take that for what it's worth. But I thought it was a good step in the right direction after last week was pretty dreadful. So Game 1, Red Sox won 8-3. Kansas City got a 2-0 lead in the second. And then the Red Sox scored 3 runs in the 6th, and then 3 runs in the 8th, and then after that they were able to seal the game. Nunez had a home run in the 8th, and Nunez had a pretty good game. He got a hit. JD Martinez had 3 hits, so he was the star of the game. Brock Holtz also had 2 hits with 2 at-bats, so pretty good game for Brock Holtz. Eduardo Rodriguez had a pretty good game, only allowing 2 runs. So, pretty good game for the Red Sox. All right, next, Game 2. So, Game 2, the Red Sox won 8-0. It was pretty much a steamroll over the Royals. They out-hit the Royals 11-3. The Red Sox scored 2 runs in the first and 4 runs in the 5th, and basically that ended the game. Andrew Benintendi had 3 hits at 4 at-bats. Rafael Devers had 2 hits. Brock Holt had 3 hits. And Devers had a home run in the 7th. And, another great win for the Red Sox. And Chris Sale had a really good game. Actually, in this game, Chris Sale had an immaculate inning. If you don't know what an immaculate inning is, it's essentially an inning in which you just throw 9 pitches. So, and which is crazy because Chris Sale had an immaculate inning basically a month ago. So, immaculate innings are really rare. They usually don't happen in baseball. To have 2 in a month, that's crazy. I mean, I remember last year Rick Porcello had one. So yeah, it's amazing. That's insane. All right, next game, a little closer. This was a bullpen game. So the Royals scored 2 runs in the second. Red Sox had 4 runs in the third, and the Kansas City made it closer with a run in the fifth. But then the Red Sox scored 3 runs in the seventh, and that essentially sealed the game. So Nunez had 3 hits. And for the most part, the offense was pretty good. Betts had a home run in the third inning, and so yeah, they were able to get the sweep over the Royals. And I thought it was a good way to start the week, even though the Royals are a bad team. When you're facing a bad team, you're supposed to beat them, like really badly, and that's what the Red Sox did. So next they played the Tampa Bay Rays, who are in their division. And they're actually a pretty good team. Solid pitching, not a ton of stars on offense, but still solid, very, very solid team. And you want to win these division games so you can come back in the division race. Unfortunately for the Red Sox, they didn't exactly. They played pretty badly. All right, let's get this over with. So game 1, the offense did not show up at all. They lost 5-1. Rick Porcello played and was not great. I mean, he wasn't terrible, but he had he only had 4 strikeouts. The offense didn't really do anything. The offense really didn't do anything at all. They got out hit 10-4. It was pretty depressing to watch. All right, game 2. The Red Sox got completely destroyed. This was actually even worse than the last one. The Red Sox had 4 runs in the second second inning, and then the bullpen basically blew it open with 4 runs in the 9th inning, and it was a complete disaster. The Rays actually out-hit the Red Sox 13-6. It was pretty bad. All right, game 3. David Price pitched, and he actually was probably the best against the only pitcher that really showed up against the Rays. So Price had a pretty good game with 10 strikeouts. The Red Sox scored 2 runs in the third, a run in the fifth, and 2 runs in the sixth, and they were able to win 5-1. Bogarts had an RBI, Hernandez had an RBI, and Chavis had a RBI. So, pretty good victory for the Red Sox, but then they would undo that in game 4, in which they lost 6-1. Like game 1, offense didn't really show up. They only scored 1 run in the second inning. They got 8 hits, so it's not like they couldn't hit, but like they just couldn't score in scoring position. And Tampa Bay had 14 hits and scored 6 runs, and unfortunately, the Red Sox really couldn't do anything to stay close in this game. So from what I can see from this from the Red Sox is that their offense, this definitely is not last year's offense. This offense, I mean, they'll have nights like last year's offense, but for the most part, this offense, either they'll score a ton of runs or they're just completely flat. Mookie Betts, I mean, I don't think he's quite Mookie Betts. He's having a decent year. He has 10 home runs. He, I believe he's in the 260 range, but yeah, that's not terrible, but for Mookie Betts, I kind of expect more from him, considering last year he was amazing and he was the clear MVP. Michael Chavis, remember how he was doing really well? Yeah, well, he's kind of dried up a little bit. He hasn't really been quite the same when he first came in, and he played really well. Nunez, JBJ, Benintendi, Leon, They'll have good games, but then they'll have really bad games. Xander Bogaerts and Christian Vasquez were two of the more consistent hitters on the team, and they've kind of slowed down a bit. And one thing I've noticed is that I think Eovaldi being out is hurting the Sox because now you're gonna have to rely on games with the bullpen, and which is gonna tire out the bullpen, and the bullpen's already bad enough. So you're using the bullpen, and so when you actually need them, they're actually not performing very well. And also I should mention again, the bullpen stinks. Matt Barnes can't save a lick, and Brazier, they're just all bad. So, all right, next we got the Texas Rangers, who are actually playing pretty decent. I thought they were going to be terrible, but so far they've actually been pretty good. So we'll see how they could play against the Texas Rangers. All right, then. Why don't we move on to the NBA Finals? So last game, the series was tied, and so we're moving on to Golden State. And for the most part in Game 3, the Toronto Raptors dominated. So first quarter, Toronto led 36-28. Golden State would fight back a little bit in the second quarter. Toronto did outscore Golden State 24-23. And then in the third quarter, Toronto outscored Golden State 36-31, and Golden State, the Toronto outscored Golden State 27-26. And so for the most part, this game wasn't really that close. Field goal percentage, Toronto shot 52.4% from the field, which is insane. Golden State is shooting 39.6%. 3-point percentage, Toronto shot 44.7%. Golden State shot 33.3%. Turnovers, Toronto had 16. Golden State had 15. Rebounds, both teams had 50. Leonard led the team in points with 30. And Steph Curry had a great game. He scored 47 points. But unfortunately, his team really couldn't really contribute at all. Danny Green had 17 points. Oh, yeah. I believe... this was the first game Klay Thompson could. I believe this might have been the first playoff game that Klay Thompson missed in his career. So Klay Thompson wasn't there, and unfortunately that kind of showed. Danny Green had 17 points. Not Danny Green. Draymond Green had 17 points, and that was their second leading scorer. So Cousins couldn't do anything. He had 4 points. Livingston couldn't do anything. He had 4 points. Iguodala couldn't do anything. He had 11 points. So Curry basically had to carry the team, and unfortunately, he didn't have much success with just carrying the team by himself. Kawhi Leonard got some help. Marc Gasol had 17. Lowry had 23. Danny Green had 18 points. So good win by the Toronto Raptors. And so you would expect the Warriors to bounce back for Game 4. And before I go into Game 4, something pretty notable happened in this game that actually made the national news. So during Game 3, Kyle Lowry, on a play, jumped into the stands. It happens usually in an NBA game. And then suddenly he was randomly shoved by somebody. And Kyle Lowry called him out. It was a horrible look. And it turned out to be Mark. At first I thought it was some random fan. It turned out to be Mark Stevens, who's a part owner of the Warriors. So that was interesting. And he was suspended by the team, and then he was banned from basketball games by the NBA for a year. It was fined $500,000. So I thought it was the right punishment. I mean, honestly, I've mentioned this before, but I don't have much tolerance for obnoxious fans. And as a part owner, I have less tolerance for somebody like that. I mean, like, you're a part owner, you should be held to a higher standard. That's something like a 5-year-old would do. Why'd you do that? All right, so Game 4. Let's move on. So Game 4, the Golden State Warriors actually started off pretty well. They led 23-17 in the first quarter, and then Toronto was able to fight back, outscoring the Warriors 25-23. And then where the Warriors really got into gear was the third quarter, and normally third quarter is when the Warriors shine, but the Toronto Raptors outscored the Warriors 37-21, and then in the fourth quarter they outscored 26-25. So pretty much a pretty good comeback for the Toronto Raptors. Kawhi Leonard had 36 points. Serge Ibaka, who's really been a big factor in this series, had 20 points, and Siakam had 19 points. So pretty good games for them. Kyle Lowry didn't really do much. He only had 10 points, but he didn't really need to be a factor because Kawhi and Siakam and Serge Ibaka were there. Klay Thompson had 28 points. Steph Curry had 27 points, even though Curry was 9 for 22 and 2 from 9 from 3. So he had kind of, by his standards, a pretty a not so great performance in game 4. And and then the fourth quarter, neither Klay nor Curry could really muster up enough offense to really come back in this game. So field goal percentage, Golden State shot 44.9%, Toronto shot 41.9%, three-point percentage, Toronto shot 31.3%, Golden State shot 29.6%. Turnovers, Toronto had 11 turnovers, Golden State had 19 turnovers. Rebounds, Toronto had 39, Golden State had 42. And in Game 5, this is the game that Kevin Durant came back to, so you would think that would provide a spark, because honestly, Kevin Durant was kind of their only hope to win this game, in my opinion. So at first, it kind of seemed like Durant. So Kevin Durant coming back, I was a little. I didn't think we were going to see a 100% Kevin Durant, because it kind of seemed like they were rushing him back out of desperation, but actually when it started, he actually looked pretty good. He hit 2 straight threes. He looked like he had his jump shot going. He seemed to provide a spark for the team, and the Golden State Warriors were just playing really good basketball. And then next thing you know, Kevin Durant plants his foot on the ground in the second quarter, and it seemed like he re-injured his leg. And we'll talk about Kevin Durant and his injury a little later, but let's focus on the game for now. So for a while, the Golden State Warriors were playing pretty good basketball, and they were outplaying the Toronto Raptors, being ridiculous from 3. I think this is the second most threes made in a finals game. But I think the most was that the Cleveland Cavaliers and Warriors game, in which the Cavs lost in 5. And also, speaking of, I'll mention this about Kevin Durant. I think it was an Achilles injury, and I'd be shocked if he went back into the finals. But we'll talk about him a little later. So, however, in the fourth quarter, the Raptors, and basically the third quarter, were able to hang in there, but they were not able to get super close or take the lead. But in the fourth quarter, Kawhi Leonard went on a tear and basically came back, helped basically get the Raptors the lead all by himself. And then the Raptors did get the lead, and then they were playing great basketball. And then they were up by 6 with 2 minutes to go. But then next thing you know, Klay Thompson and Steph Curry hit threes to tie the game. And then Klay hit a three to take the lead. And then next thing you know, actually, I will mention this also. Nick Nurse took a timeout while the Raptors were going on that run, and I think most analysts are saying this, and I kind of agree. I don't really understand why he took that timeout, because when you have a team on the brink, you need to push them off the cliff, because the Warriors, they look gassed, and you could argue that timeout gave them time to breathe and made them refocus. So I don't really know why Nick Nurse did that. I won't go as far to say that blew the game, but I don't really understand why he did that. And then at the end of the game, the Warriors did their best to essentially give the Raptors an opportunity to win this game. Give credit to their defense for coming through, but offensively, they did their best to try to blow this game. So there was a turnover off a Draymond Green backcourt violation, and I'll mention this right now. DeMarcus Cousins had a pretty solid game when he came in, but he almost blew the game. There was a goaltend. There was an offensive interference that was kind of iffy, but I thought it was a good call to not overturn the call. And there was an offensive foul at the end, which gave the Raptors a chance to get the win. So in the last possession, there was Kawhi Leonard had the ball in his hand, and it was pretty good defense by Warriors by double-teaming Kawhi, and then forcing Kyle Lowry to take a really tough shot in the corner. Which and I think Draymond Green had a tipped the ball a little bit, so it was thrown off. So I don't know if it would have gotten in if Draymond Green didn't touch it, but Draymond Green playing pretty good really good defense as usual. So so Curry 31 points, Klay Thompson 26 points, definitely the stars. DeMarcus Cousins had 14 points, contributed. Draymond Green had 10 points, but I would say most of his work was on the defensive end with, I believe, 10 rebounds. Yeah. And 8 assists. Man, Draymond Green. And Kevin Durant, for the time that he played, I believe he only played 12 minutes, definitely contributed with 11 points. Unfortunately, he got injured. So in this game, Golden State shot 46.3%, and Toronto shot 44.7%. Golden State shot 47.6 from 3. My goodness. And Toronto shot 25%. Turnovers, Golden State had 16. Toronto had 13. Rebounds, Golden State had 45 rebounds, and Toronto had 54 rebounds. So, there's one takeaway you can take away from this series is that rebounds really don't matter. So here's the thing. About this game, because this was definitely the best game of the series, not even close. I don't really know why at the end. I in my opinion, I would have had Kawhi Leonard try to take the last shot. He's your best player. I know he was double teamed, but I think he could have gotten a shot off and maybe won the game. But whatever. That was good. I consider that more good defense by Golden State. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to pass the ball. And like I said before, I don't really know why Nick Nurse called the timeout when he did. And basically, he didn't use his last timeout. I think you could have probably better utilized that for maybe an inbounds play or maybe something like that at the end. But, yeah, I think the more egregious thing that Nick Nurse did was he called a timeout when the Golden State Warriors were on their run. I mean, the Raptors were on their run at the end of the game. I don't really understand why he did that. And like I said before, I think it's a little extreme for people to say it cost them the game, but I still don't understand why they did that. Kevin Durant, so Bob Meyer, the owner of the Warriors, said it was an Achilles injury and that he blames himself for Durant being injured. And I'd be shocked if he comes back. I'm pretty sure that he's done for the Warriors for this NBA Finals, which makes me think that they maybe forced him to come back. Maybe they rushed him back because they were so desperate for him because they were on the brink of elimination. So that's what I think, but I think Kevin Durant, he's definitely out for the playoffs. I think he has a torn Achilles, and I don't know when he's going to be able to come back. It usually torn Achilles for a basketball player, that ain't good, and this could definitely have implications on the off season. But for now, let's focus on the NBA Finals. So, from what I've seen from this series is I think what's given the Raptors an advantage is definitely their length. I think their length is affecting the Warriors, especially on the defensive end. The Raptors, I think, with their length, can get into the Warriors' face and force them into some bad shots. I think their depth. I think other than Clay and Curry, you don't really have a lot of players that can get you at least, like, you can rely on to get at least 20 points a night or at least 15 points a night. And I feel like the Raptors have more players that can do that. Ibaka, Lowry, Kawhi, Siakam. Like, you could rely on more of those guys to show up every night. I feel like the depth of the Raptors is affecting the Warriors as far as scoring. And if Kevin Durant was here, I think one thing that I've noticed about the Warriors ever since the dynasty has continued is that their depth is shrinking. Because when they started, they had a lot of depth, but now that the depth players are getting older and players are leaving, they don't quite have the depth they used to. And without Kevin Durant there, it really, really shows. So looking at this series, I'm still picking the. I picked the Warriors in 6. That's not happening. So I actually think the advantage goes to the Raptors. I still think they can win in Golden State. I think without Durant, I don't think the Warriors had quite enough to match what the Raptors can throw at them. However, I can't imagine the Warriors losing 3 home games. I mean, they're always a really good home team, and so I can't really imagine them losing 3 home games in the finals. So we'll see how Game 6 goes. If the Raptors lose Game 6, I'd be a little worried if I was a Raptors fan, because the Raptors haven't been in a Game 7, and they, other than Kawhi Leonard, they don't really have a lot of championship experience, unlike the Golden State Warriors, even though it is in Toronto. I mean, the Warriors, actually, I think the Warriors have been better on the road than at home, kind of like the Blues this postseason. So, yeah, we'll see how the NBA Finals goes. And it kind of seemed like this would be quick after the Raptors got a 3-1 lead, but now it's a little interesting. We'll see how it goes, and Game 6 should be a lot of fun. Alright then, why don't we go into some quick stories. So quick stories are stories that are big topics, but honestly I don't really have a lot to say about them, so that's why I call them quick stories. So let's go into some quick stories. So first story, the Patriots got their Super Bowl rings this week, in which they're the biggest Super Bowl rings ever. And I took a look at them, and yeah, they look pretty good. I believe it's the largest Super Bowl ring of all time, and if the Patriots in the future won a 7th ring, I mean, what like at what point what's the limit to how big these rings can be? Jeez, my goodness. All right, next story. So Paul Pierce revealed a secret about 2008 in the finals. I'm sure you remember that game in which Paul Pierce was carried out in a wheelchair, and then he came back and he played big for the Celtics. And for a while, everybody thought it was an injury, even though it looked a little, it looked a little over-dramatic to be an injury. And so Paul Pierce finally revealed on air, while covering the NBA Finals, what that was. So apparently, it was because Paul Pierce had to go to the bathroom. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny. even though it kind of ruins the mystique of that moment and the mystery of that moment, even though people don't really take that moment seriously. And like Paul Pierce is already a punchline as an analyst. Like everybody makes fun of him as an analyst, so this doesn't really help his image, which is kind of sad because Paul Pierce is one of the greatest Celtics of all time, and most people just kind of laugh at him. So I think that's kind of sad, but whatever. It's still kind of funny though. Next, so apparently Anthony Davis has reportedly closed down on the teams that he wants to play for, and he looks like he's narrowed down 2 teams as his long-term destinations: Lakers and Knicks. So what this tells me, I remember Davis said that he cares about his legacy and doesn't care about money and wants to be viewed as a winner. So what this tells me is Anthony Davis wants to expand his brand, because these are the 2 biggest markets in the NBA and also 2 of the worst run franchises in the NBA. So that's what that tells me. All right, next up, apparently there's a rumor going around that Kyrie is strongly considering joining the Brooklyn Nets, which I guess won't surprise me. I mean, he's from the New York area. I believe he was born in New Jersey, and the Nets seem to be running better than the Knicks, who. And if he can't get Durant there, I don't know. I don't think he'd want to go to the Knicks by himself, because the Knicks really don't have anything right now. And the Nets at least have D'Angelo Russell. And even if he goes to the Nets, I don't really know. I mean, him and Russell are both ball handling. Guards. So I don't really know how that would work. But whatever. Next, so Tony Parker has announced his retirement after 18 seasons. So. Tony Parker's finally going to retire. So, all-time great point guard, one of the greatest international players of all time, definitely a top 5 San Antonio Spur of all time. During the dynasty run, he might be 3rd or 4th on the greatest Spurs during the dynasty. Dave Robinson would be 2, Duncan would be 1. And they'd be either Ginobili or Parker, who are 3rd. I mean, it's kind of weird that basically all the Spurs from the dynasty are basically gone, and like it's really weird that all the players that I grew up watching are retiring. It's a little strange. All right, next story. So Carson Wentz is getting a contract extension. So Carson Wentz got a 4-year, $128 million contract extension with $66 million guarantees. So it's not the biggest contract ever, but I mean, I think I read this was the 2nd biggest fully guaranteed money of all time. So yeah, good for Carson Wentz. And I mean, all of this really depends on Carson Wentz's health, because maybe his rookie year, I don't remember the last time Carson Wentz played a full season. Like, he always seems to be getting hurt. So, obviously this contract depends on, can Carson Wentz stay healthy for an entire season? Because if he can, he has the talent to be an elite quarterback. But, obviously, this contract really depends on Carson Wentz's health. So, looks like the Eagles' future is secured. We'll see how it goes. If Carson Wentz stays healthy, then I think it'll be good. If he doesn't, then unfortunately, I think people in Philadelphia are going to scream back for Nick Foles. All right, next story. So this is actually kind of an old story, but I heard about it recently. I thought it was kind of interesting. So O.J. Simpson. So the Bills recently gave the number 32, if you guys don't know, 32 was the number O.J. Simpson wore, to Sonoris Perry, who's a journeyman running back. And Perry noticed that the number wasn't retired. And so he asked if he could use it, and he was like, and the Bills were like, sure. So they gave him the number. So I'm a little mixed on giving Sonoris Perry the number 32. On the one hand, giving up the number essentially means that the Bills don't hold O.J. Simpson in a high regard. So I mean, and I don't really mind that because O.J. Simpson is human trash. So I mean, if they give away that number to a nobody, that means they don't really hold him in big regard. But on the other hand, I don't know if you want to bring attention to O.J. Simpson, because you give somebody number 32, the first person you're going to think of, 32 in a Bills uniform, is O.J. Simpson. And so you give this guy that number, people are just going to keep thinking O.J. Simpson. So I feel like it's a bit of a distraction, and it brings back memories of O.J. Simpson, who, I mean, we should all just forget about. Because, like I said, he's human garbage. But, I don't know. I guess it's not a big deal. But at the same time, I don't know if you want to be reminded about O.J. Simpson again. All right, so our last story. Is that apparently I read a report that players might want to get rid of the term owners in the NBA. So apparently they want to get rid of the term owner because it implies that the owners own the players, like slaves. Look, I'm all for equality and I'm all for equality and I'm all for anti-discrimination. But honestly, this is kind of stupid. I mean, the guy who bought the team, he owns the team. Like, if somebody bought a company, they own it because they bought it. Who hears the word owner and thinks slave master? This is ridiculous. What? So we're not, because apparently if a black guy is trying to learn karate, we can't call the teacher master, because back in the day, the slaves used to call their slave owners master. Is that where we're going? Oh, geez, so stupid. All right, then that'll be it, and that'll wrap up the sports podcast. And I was also thinking about who'll be the bannerman for Game 7. I have a hunch that it's going to be Tom Brady. Just a gut hunch that Tom Brady will be the bannerman for Game 7 for the Bruins. Yeah, and also, like I said before, continue to pray for David Ortiz and wish him good luck. All right, then. Thank you for listening to J-Ho the Sports Dude, and I'm out.